Well, it's about time we talked about this one.
And more importantly, where on earth do we start?
What a movie.
Yeah.
First of all, the reason it's taken this long is, first of all, when we first saw it on opening day, we didn't want to talk about it right away because we wanted to get, we wanted to avoid spoilers for a while, and even by the next day, everybody was already talking
and very divisively
one of the most divisive Star Wars movies ever.
I mean, there's no two ways about it. I mean, it really does feel like that. You know, we made the predictions back even before The Force Awakens that a war was coming.
And I think it finally might be here.
Yeah, I think it is. I definitely think that. But no, let's save that for a little bit later. There's a lot to unpack there. Let's talk about the movie itself. Last Jedi. I mean, I think this was a terrific movie.
I still need time to evaluate it. I didn't think it sucked. It was very entertaining. I thought it was a wonderful send-off to Luke Skywalker and even Carrie Fisher. I just don't know how high I'd rate it on the Star Wars scale.
I've even had this conversation with a few co-workers that I've had. It's very hard to really judge movies, especially Star Wars movies, in that moment in time, in like the immediate moments after it gets released, because, you know, how many times have we said that, you know, how many times did we say that The Force Awakens was a great movie, and then all of a sudden, all that it feels like that everything that's being said in the run-up is just how, The Force Awakens was nothing more than a two-bit.
It was just a new hope. It was just a new hope.
And then it's just like, and then everyone's talking big about Rogue One, and then it's like everyone's forgotten about how that movie was when it released a year ago. So this movie by itself, it had a lot to live up to, and I think that it also, it had an unenviable position because it had to basically be that next step after Episode 7, whereas Episode 7 was sort of reacclimating everyone to the franchise and sort of getting folks at least used in the broad strokes of this new normal that is, you know, this 30 years post Return of the Jedi. There's no debate that I think that this movie probably had the most to prove, and I think that Rian Johnson was more than up to the task.
Well, a lot of people, unfortunately, will challenge you on that, but
well,
we'll talk about that later.
Again, yeah, we'll talk about that later. So, I mean, if nothing else, I think most of the actors in this movie really leveled up their performances from The Force Awakens. I think Adam Driver in particular was absolutely just fantastic.
He's finally proved that Kylo Ren is a capable villain.
Capable and intimidating.
Yeah.
I definitely think that if you had any doubts about how this guy was just sort of like the Screamo Vader, basically, watch a little bit of this film and that'll be put to rest pretty dang quickly. Daisy Ridley wasn't, I guess, as, I don't know, it's hard to say, it wasn't, maybe not as charming as she was in The Force Awakens?
I would possibly argue that with so much going on in this movie, it's not really her story.
That's very true.
I mean, the trilogy, of course, is her story, but the movie not necessarily is.
And it's supposed to be more of just kind of how the universe is, sort of like how it was in Empire Strikes Back in the original trilogy, and in a certain extent also kind of how the seeds were planted in Attack of the Clones, really the second movie in each of the trilogies.
How would you say Attack of the Clones?
Well, Attack of the Clones had the whole thing about seeing the banking clan come together, the beginning of the Clone Wars.
Oh,
the early stages.
More than the banking clan. It was the Techno Union and Trade Federation.
I'm not arguing that. I'm just saying that you're starting to see what leads to what that movie is basically the beginning of the fall of the Republic and the Jedi Order. which of
The
course,
beginnings of the Clone Wars.
yes, which is the beginning of the end for everything else. But going away from
And also the beginning of a fantastic animated series.
you know, let's keep on target here.
Yes.
Let's not. But no, you're right. There was a lot that was happening in this movie. I mean, not to say that Daisy Ridley's performance was bad by any stretch of the imagination.
No, she's wonderful.
I mean, much like Gal Gadot in the DC movies, she's been a very well acclimated newcomer to this franchise. No two ways about it. I mean, Oscar Isaacs definitely.
He finally gave Poe something to do.
Gave Poe something to do, so definitely more, and certainly raised a lot of questions, especially during the first viewing of the movie. It's just like through a lot of, say, like the second act, right before you get to the finale of the movie. You're questioning practically at every turn, who on earth are you trusting here?
Do you trust the high-ups, or do you trust this one rogue member?
Or do you trust yourself in that? I mean, because
like nobody is telling anybody anything,
right.
Which has been one of the points of contention.
Well, and I think that one of the easiest ways to kind of counter that is you be basically, you know, a few ranks below things, and basically try to go to the leader of your thing and get a straight answer. You're not going to get it.
That may depend on the situation. I'm no military expert, so.
Nor am I. So I mean, again, my connection for military is very passe, if you will. But no, I mean, just everything about, and then John Boyega as Finn finally gets really a full reason as to why he should stick with the Resistance and fight against the First Order rather than just wanting to cut and run, because that basically
now he has something to fight for.
Exactly, and I think that's one of the biggest reasons why one of the more contested parts of this movie I actually don't think is as bad as a lot of people say that it is. And of course, I'm talking about the scene on Canto Bight. Yeah,
this scene has gotten a lot of flack for reasons ranging from social commentary, which I don't know, when did social commentary become a bad thing? And
when Trump became president.
And just the general futileness of the mission because they never actually accomplished anything. Well, you know, by that logic, Raiders of the Lost Ark is pointless.
Yeah.
Because without Indiana Jones, the Nazis would have gotten the Ark and killed each other anyway.
There you go.
And no, I did not get that from the Big Bang Theory. I've had that pointed out to me long before that.
So, yeah, let's keep that. But I think that just seeing, you know, the regards of failures in here is, you know, you not only had that, what you saw with the Canto Bight scene with Finn and Rose, and we'll talk about Kelly Marie Tran here in a moment, and then also just essentially the failed mutiny by Poe on the Resistance cruiser, because
the movie is all about failures, just like The Empire Strikes Back.
Exactly. And that was exactly the point that I was going to be bringing up.
And Revenge of the Sith.
And Revenge of the Sith. But I was going to bring up specifically in Empire Strikes Back, the whole situation was Luke leaving Dagobah. If Luke leaves Dagobah, even if Luke leaves Dagobah, you know, Lando still gets Leia and Chewie out of that little situation.
Exactly. That's a good point.
So it's just you think that it's just pointless, but at the same time, it's also building these characters.
I think what needs to be said that even if a mission is pointless, what about the story you tell around that pointlessness?
Exactly. I think that there's a quote that was brought up, I think, in Movie Bob's Really That Bad video series he's been doing on Batman v Superman recently, where he quotes Alfred Hitchcock, where he says, "Movies should be stronger than reason." And I think that too many people these days have forgotten that quote.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, he also brings up another quote that Hitchcock said, where he says, "You know why they don't go to the cops in a movie? Because it's boring."
Yes.
I mean, I think that because we decided to get so pedantic and having every single little thing connected, it just makes the whole thing. You have the potential. While it makes sense in some regards, at the same time, you run a real risk of making the movie just nothing more than a slog.
And people have argued that it is because they've compared the whole plot of the film to the O.J. Simpson chase. It's nothing but a chase through space, a slow chase through space.
Yeah. Okay. Pardon me for saying this, but do people remember how much of a big deal that was when that actually happened? I mean, I was only 7 or 8 years old when that happened.
I had to have been about 12.
And I even remember, and it was like, it was literally just like, I was glued to the TV when it was happening. I was just like, what is going on? It's one of those first real big news events that I remember, growing up as a young kid. And just, it's just, but why is that a bad thing, that it's a slow speed chase?
I mean, even Empire Strikes Back was a chase.
Exactly. They're chasing the Falcon, for goodness sakes. Oh, and since we're on that topic, I mean, the subject of fuel, because I know that's been a pedantic thing that some people have brought up. You do know that they even roughly mentioned that in Empire, where Han says when he's looking as to where they could hide out, says Bestman, we might be able to make it.
It's pretty far from here, but I think we can make it. Yeah.
So that's basically kind of implying that there's probably some kind of a fuel source.
I mean, what do you think spaceships run on? You see those flames coming out of the thrusters? They're burning something.
But let's also talk about the newest addition to the mythos and character-wise, and talk about Kelly Marie Tran's Rose. Quite an interesting character, if nothing else.
And again, one of those divisive elements, mostly from the alt-right. Her character, her Wikipedia page was vandalized with racist remarks and blah 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 blah.
I mean, first off, we also have to remember that I mean, she's Vietnamese.
She's Vietnamese, and she's not Chinese.
So anyone that says that this was a conspiracy by Disney to try to capture the Chinese market, just shut up. Just shut up. I've got more to talk about in regards to the money side of things a little bit later, but we're going to keep it right here. And I think that Kelly Marie Tran, she acclimated herself quite well to this role, I think.
She wasn't one of my favorites, but I think she was an interesting addition, giving a different perspective on a resistance member.
Which I think has always been something that has kind of been lacking in regards to the movies itself, because we never really got a look at any kind of lives of rebel soldiers.
The lower class rebels or
soldiers.
lower ranks.
At least not until Disney bought Lucasfilm. Let's be reasonable about that, I think. Then we go from there. Let's also go into, of course, our returning legacy characters. Of course, Carrie Fisher, her final on-screen
role as anyone, really.
Yeah.
I thought it was a fitting farewell.
I thought so too. I think that Carrie. I think obviously Carrie had no one had any idea that anything was going to happen, because they were obviously.
She owns so much of the movie.
Absolutely. Though we should actually cover one part that's probably the biggest point of contention from some at this point.
What people have either called Super Leia or Leia Poppins.
First off, Leia Poppins, I'm sorry, no. Yondu gets that distinction. in regards to anything from.
I'm Mary Poppins, yo!
He gets that distinction. Okay. I'm really wondering whether or not I like this scene or I don't. And
It was certainly a moment that, when we first saw it, everyone in the audience was just like, what the
yeah, it was literally just like, what am I watching here? But I'm also thinking about this whole thing. Do you remember a character named Darth Maul? And how he was sliced in half at one point? And somehow he managed to stay alive to be retconned back into Clone Wars and eventually Rebels? Why wouldn't the Force be able to keep someone like Leia alive?
The people I've had arguments with this over is that, vacuum in space. And I'm like, what, the Force isn't able to create a bubble that protects you from that vacuum?
And even
the Force can do whatever the writer wants it to do.
Within reason, of course.
Within reason, yeah.
Although some would say this was not within reason. Which, again, I'm not 100% sure about it myself. I mean, I think I've seen it now 3 times, and every single time I watch it, I'm wondering, I don't know what to think about this. Is this good or is this bad? I actually don't think it's as bad as some people say, but I'm also not ready to call it a good thing. It's probably the one biggest scene that my younger brother has the most problems with.
I think that something that could be said is, if you're going to have her live at the end of the movie, why have that scene? Or, like, what is it that it's supposed to show us? That she's strong in the Force? Well, we kind of presumed that ever since Jedi.
That's true.
The thing that's had me facepalm is when people say, when did she learn to do that? It's been 30 years.
You don't think that she hasn't had a little
bit of guidance from her brother?
I mean, you could say maybe not in the last 10 years or so, or however long it's been since a certain event with Kylo Ren and Luke Skywalker.
I have heard tell that it's been 6 years, but I haven't gotten clarification on that.
Okay, well, I was doing 10 years as sort of a rough estimate.
Right.
But no, okay, let's get into Luke Skywalker.
There has been so much controversy over this portrayal ever since Mark Hamill had said, I fundamentally disagree with my character in this film. There have been so many YouTube videos taking clips of that out of context without any of the follow-up or lead into, where he's basically said that, I'm not a screen maker, what do I know, my ideas are pretty crazy, and, this is a guy who, during Return of the Jedi, wanted Luke to go dark, so, and he has said that, having seen the film, I absolutely love it, and
even then, there's just a ton of folks that are, just absolutely, just using the out-of-context quotes to basically support whatever kind of agenda that they have.
It got to the point that they've been doing so much of that recently he had to come out and tweet, I regret saying any of that stuff. And people are saying, oh, you're just saying that because Disney must have hand-slapped you. We know what's really going on. I don't have any proof to back it up, but I know it's true. And it's like, I win no matter what you say. And Mark had to come out again recently and say, let me make it clear that neither Disney nor Lucasfilm has told me what to say or what not to say, period.
You really think a guy with the kind of career that Mark Hamill has would be afraid of retribution by any of these studios? Trust me, the guy has been a part of this franchise now for over 40 years. You think that he would know how to conduct himself. I mean, holy crap, people. I know that we're living in the age of Trump, but is common sense just a little too much to ask from a bunch of Star Wars fans? So, going from that, his portrayal of his character, which is basically not the I guess you couldn't say he's sort of like the warm hermit, I guess is what you could say, the way that Obi-Wan Kenobi was.
He is a very standoffish.
Very standoffish, and heck, we get that in the very first moment, very first interaction between him and Rey in this movie. You know, picking up basically right where The Force Awakens ended off, he takes the lightsaber, what does he do? He just chucks it over his shoulder.
I thought that was brilliant. If there's something I will definitely give this movie credit for, is that it shows no mercy bullshitting with your expectations.
Oh, no question.
Everything that you think is gonna happen.
Like, okay, you bring up that. Let's talk about a couple other examples. Snoke. You think that there's any kind of big reveal about Snoke?
About that. I love what they did with Snoke. The fact that he was betrayed at this point in a trilogy,
yes.
I thought that was brilliant. But who was he? And I've seen people argue, well, we didn't know anything about the Emperor when he was introduced. To that I counter, this is the sequel trilogy. You can't end with the Emperor dead and pick up 30 years later with someone new and powerful and in charge and expect us to just accept that. He had to have been someone that knew the Solos and was already powerful in the dark side.
I mean, again, we're probably going to get that kind of a story probably in a future like novelization,
and at
some point, which is perfectly fine.
And there's this thing that people say like to throw around. I shouldn't have to read a book in order to understand a movie. And the only counter I can give to that is I'll just admit I'm not the biggest fan of 2001: A Space Odyssey. I feel that it's a 20-minute story that's been drawn out into 2 hours, and a very confusing story at that. And whenever I see someone posit that it is a confusing story, usually the answers I either see are, well, you're too dumb to understand it, or, well, the book makes more sense. Well, why is that excuse okay?
Yeah, why is the book excuse okay here and not there? I don't know. But no, I mean, we don't learn anything more about Snoke other than just that...
My personal headcanon is he's one of these guys from Return of the Jedi. And what would have satisfied me would have been just some kind of line of dialogue where he's just like, I was taught by the Emperor of old. His advisors learned many ways of the dark side of the Force. The destruction of the second Death Star left me crippled, but now I have brought the Emperor's last orders to fruition or something. That would have been just fine.
Which I don't have any issue with. I mean, I think that they're still going to have some kind of... explanation at some point. It's just a little surprising that we didn't get one in the movie. But then again, this movie is not endeared to hold your hand through the entire thing. But speaking of other things that bullshit with your expectations, Rey's parents.
I thought that was brilliant.
They're just nobody.
They're nobody, and people have taken issue with that. Is that they want the Force to be hereditary and all that. Aren't these the same people that complained about midichlorians?
Yes. And again, I've said that I feel like that the anger towards midichlorians really comes from a genuine place of ignorance. That they think they assume it means one thing, but they never really learn what they are actually.
Why is it so implausible that she was born with an extremely high midichlorian count?
Exactly. Like one thing that I forget who I saw it from on Twitter earlier today, but someone on Twitter said, said that Anakin was a chosen one. Why can't Rey be a chosen one? Not the chosen one, but a chosen one. And I think that that's something that we're going to see as this franchise moves forward. you're going to see more of this sort of like this democratization of the Force, because that's a big thing I think that Luke brings up in during the training with Rey, is how much the Jedi religion basically was so dogmatic.
He has researched what went on in the prequels, and he knows the Jedi's failings.
Yeah. Hey, wait a minute. I thought those movies were supposed to be erased.
I know. He specifically mentions Darth Sidious by name, not the Emperor.
No, but it's simply something that I think that we're going to start seeing this happen again, and I think that has the potential for more stories in that regard. But yeah, I mean, Rey's parents were nobodies, just a couple of junk traders on Jakku. So she wasn't left behind, as it was implied in her Force vision in Episode 7. So maybe what that spaceship was, maybe she was sold to Unkar Plot, and the spaceship that she saw fly away was just like her just watching the ships fly away, wanting...
It's exactly what it looks like. They left her.
There you go.
It's exactly what it looks like. And, you know, the fact that we wondered if she was connected to anybody, in hindsight, is kind of hilarious, because what kind, powerful parent would leave a child behind with Unkar Plot?
Yeah. I think the writing should have been on the wall with that. But I mean, just the whole, and it just continues to just mess with your expectations, and especially you say with Laura Dern's character, Vice Admiral Holdo. Again, you don't hear much from her, and because of that, Poe gets very frustrated to the point where he winds up leading a mutiny because he thinks that she's basically leading the Resistance into a death trap. Which
goes back to what we were saying earlier. Nobody tells each other anything.
But then at the end...
She's not telling her plan, he's not telling his plan.
Until it's far too late. Mm-hmm. But after that, you know, it almost entirely works out. And that's going to be something that's going to be interesting, I think, for Poe's character going forward. He probably knows that his plan with Finn and Rose basically botched the Resistance's escape. If he had not botched that, and if they could have gotten down the crate unnoticed, they could have probably holed out there long enough so that they could have gotten some folks from the Resistance in. Who knows? But there's no two ways about it. He has to live with that failure and live with the guilt of that.
Not just that failure, the failure at the beginning of the movie
with the battle against the Dreadnought. I mean, it was a clear case of, yeah, they destroyed the Dreadnought, but they ended up losing an entire fleet of bombers, which is
bombers!
And I hit another sore spot.
Apparently people have forgotten that bombers exist in Star Wars.
Yeah, Y-wings, anyone?
Well, not so much Y-wings. Those are more torpedo-based, but TIE bombers.
Well, I was also saying that, well, you say they're more torpedo-based. Well, not if you've actually played Rogue Squadron.
Well, is Rogue Squadron canon anymore?
I guess I gotta give you that.
Well, are we using video games to back ourselves up?
I'm only saying that just because that's the one thing I know. Right? Let's just be reasonable about it.
But in Empire, we see TIE bombers dropping bombs on an asteroid, in space, in a vacuum.
Yeah.
And people have tried to give me crap. Well, they're not dropping them, they're shooting them. You can't prove that.
No.
Even their bombs, Wikipedia states, they're dropping the bombs.
But no,
But either way, the visual dictionary states that the bombs in this movie are magnetic based. But again, people just say, why should I have to read a book to...
But I will say this much: even when you have Holdo's screw up, even when you have Poe's screw up, I should say, it then leads to, I think, two of the best scenes in the entire movie. For one, you get the awesome lightsaber battle on Snoke's ship and Snoke's throne room.
Fantastic battle. You know, people said, oh, the movie didn't even have a lightsaber battle. Maybe not against each other, but...
No, that was very well executed, very well choreographed.
When we first saw it, the crowd went nuts.
It was, especially how it started, no
Exactly.
less. I mean, how it, like, if you haven't seen it, we're not going to talk about the details here, but suffice to say, like it was, another one of those situations, BSing with your expectations. Mm-hmm. We weren't expecting that at all.
And that further plays with your expectations, because on that moment, you think that Kylo has turned good. No, he's turned against his master.
Much the same way that Vader did against Palpatine. Only this time, he's still alive, and he knows that he essentially has a chance to seize power once and for all. Mm-hmm. And here's another thing that I'm actually looking forward to in Episode 9. The continued dynamic between him and Hux. Because, I'm sorry, those two, they're gonna fucking kill each other.
They are Abbott and Costello.
It really feels like that. I mean, you get the scene at the very end of the confrontation in the throne room. Hux witnesses Kylo Ren on the ground, prone
by Snoke's remains,
and he is about 5 seconds away from pulling out his blaster and ending him
basically
right then and there.
Court-martialing him,
more or less. I mean, it's just. I'm looking forward to seeing what they do, because I think that there's some really delicious intrigue that could go on between those two. But it also comes right after, I think, maybe one of the best damn scenes in the entire franchise. The cruiser light speeding directly into Snoke's ship and destroying the entire fleet of Star Destroyers.
That was awesome.
I remember sitting in the theater watching that, and it's just like, I'm wondering what is going on, and I'm like, she's gonna fly right into that, and we're just all wondering what is gonna happen with that. She blasts through, no sound. It just lets the carnage speak for itself, and then BOOM!
It was basically sort of an upgrade of Jango Fett's seismic charges,
which I've maintained that's arguably my favorite. Just sound that came from the prequels, just that delayed burst, and then just a
what Ben Burtt called an audio black hole.
Well described. I mean, when I remember seeing that when I first saw Attack of the Clones. I mean, it's like it like rattled me right in my chest. I'm like, whoa, oh boy! But no, both those two scenes were utterly fantastic. If nothing else, just shows just what an eye that I think that both the effects team and Rian Johnson have for plotting out these kinds of scenes. But moving on from that, then you get the battle on Crate, and you get these really nice looking these new walkers, much bigger than what we have the standard AT-ATs.
Much like how Starkiller Base was bigger than the Death Star.
And let's get into that, because now we talk about how the battering ram cannon was miniaturized Death Star tech, and so many people are still
they're being all like, they just can't get away from the Death Star.
Why would they want to get away from the Death Star?
The Death Star tech is not the point of that battering ram. That's simply an explanation on why it's so powerful. The point of the battering ram is it's homaging Return of the King, where they had the big battering ram, Gron, I think it was called,
right,
going up against the fortress, and it was like a big, big deal.
But again, I also bring up the point, why on earth would you get away from Death Star tech? I'm sorry, wasn't the Death Star one of the Empire's most successful weapons? Why would you get away from technology that worked for you? It's like, okay, I get why so many people don't want like everything to be the copy of the Death Star, because let's face it, the Death Star is iconic. The Death Star is, there's a reason that it's basically become, almost synonymous with a planet killer, for heaven's sakes. But it's just like, why would you get away from technology that worked so effectively for you? I mean, it's one of the reasons why I never had a problem with Starkiller Base being what it was. Because having it be a charged up Death Star made perfect sense for it being 30 years in the future. So it's just like
a Death Star that could hit multiple targets at once.
Yes. Yes, you're 100% right about that. But no, it just never ceases to amaze me sometimes, just how the whole thing, just how pedantic fans can be. And since we're talking about how pedantic fans can be, let's talk about the discussion over the box office numbers.
Oh.
Because this is getting a little bit absurd, okay? Because so many people are looking at, okay, this movie had an absolutely fantastic opening weekend. There's no two ways about that. The second weekend, though, for the weekend excluding Christmas, and I'll get back to that here in a moment, it actually had one of, if not the worst drop-off in regards to, week 1 to week 2 in history. Like, it was something like 69%, right?
I had heard 77%.
No, it was not 77%. It was 69%. I think that the numbers are on Box Office Mojo. It might have been, like a day-to-day drop or something compared from, like, the previous Friday to the first Friday to the previous Friday or something. Mm-hmm. But here's a perfectly good explanation for that. Rewind back to 2015. The Force Awakens opened on December 18th, which was a Friday. Mm-hmm. The Friday after that, of course, was Christmas. Mm-hmm. You had the benefit of having not only Friday night be Christmas, but also the Christmas weekend of Saturday and Sunday. So not a lot of stuff going on, not a lot of traveling. Most of the folks that are either going to see these movies or doing other things, they've already done their traveling. They're not having to do anything else. All the shopping is done. They don't have to worry about it. This year, Christmas was on a Monday, which means you not only had 3 full days, the 22nd, 23rd, and 24th, you had 3 full days where folks could have been traveling, shopping, or doing anything else other than going to the movies. I work in retail. I know how busy it was that weekend before Christmas. I don't think anyone should be at all surprised that the numbers took a dip. And when you factored in Christmas Day, when in regards to how the movie was doing, it only had a drop, I believe, of about 55% or 59%. Box Office Mojo has the numbers. Go take a look at that. With that, I honestly think that so many of these people out there who just love to find chinks in the armor of anything that is even remotely successful, they just decided to just ignore the context and basically call this thing a bomb. Call a bomb for a movie that has made easily over $500 million domestically, has just made $1 billion with a B worldwide, being only the 3rd movie in the entire year to do that, behind Fast and Furious 8 and Beauty and the Beast, and I think maybe Wonder Woman might be in there, but I'm not 100% sure on that. It's like, what are you looking at to basically say? I mean, is this frustration over the fact that Disney now owns 21st Century Fox?
These people that see Disney as the evil corporation that will dictate the world and blah 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 blah.
It's just like, okay, look, let's face it, Disney isn't exactly the most, let's face reality, Disney isn't a perfect corporation. None of them are. None of these movie studios are perfect. Paramount's not perfect. Warner Brothers isn't perfect. Universal isn't perfect. Hell, so many people still want to say that George Lucas is still benefiting from having these movies as is, even though he sold his own goddamn company.
It's called show business. Emphasis on business.
Like, I don't get why so many people, here's the frustrating part about this. All the people that were complaining about the geeks and everyone, sort of being excited over Fox being owned by Disney, because now other Marvel properties that were not in the MCU prior now stand a pretty good chance of being brought into the fold. I wonder how many of these same people complained about some of the decisions that George Lucas made when he had final say on the prequel trilogy. It's like, do you want to have movies that are done by original filmmakers or not? Because by basically going the direction you did and basically railing on George Lucas to the point where he wanted to sell the company. Let's face the reality. That's the thing that everyone forgets. He wanted to unload Star Wars. He wanted to unload his studio because he knew that if he had made anything more, he would have gotten all sorts of flack on it.
Exactly.
Like, do I need to bring up how he got killed over stuff in Indiana Jones and Kingdom of the Crystal Skull? Do I need to bring up about how much people put the blame of, say, remember the movie Strange Magic squarely on Lucas?
Well, he was pretty involved on that movie.
How involved? I mean,
it was his story. It was his concept.
Okay. Who wrote the adaptation? Who directed the film? Who had the day-to-day operations on that? I don't think it was George Lucas.
The better argument would be Red Tails.
Red Tails is probably another really good, another good one right there. It just blows my mind how so many of these folks that want to do that. And you bring up the Red Tails, that's when he said the word about, why would I want to make another Star Wars movie when people are going to instantly hate everything that I do? And people killed him for that. They literally killed him on social media for that.
And now look what they're doing to Rian Johnson. It's exactly what he was talking about.
It's the same thing that I think that was said in that was said. Was it said in Prequel Strike Back that no one hates Star Wars more than Star Wars fans? It's this whole
tribal.
This tribalistic mentality, I don't know what you want to call it, just this, it's like...
Everyone thinks that they can do a better Star Wars movie than the actual professionals.
Exactly, and it's just like, and then when it's not exactly the way that it lines up, people are mad, and I think that's just the anger-inducing part of this whole thing. It's like, we can't just sit back and just let these guys do their job and just be amused at the results. We have to take this whole thing so seriously. And it's just absolutely, just so frustrating. And, I've even heard people say that when George wanted to sell it to Disney, he sold it to Disney knowing that they would probably ruin it. And I'm just thinking to myself, what? I'm like, okay, pardon me for saying this. If I were a guy and I wanted to intentionally ruin a franchise that I had grown resentful of, I probably would have sold it to Warner Brothers of all places. Because, let's be fair, aside from Wonder Woman...
Warner Brothers did release a Star Wars movie. Clone Wars?
That's... Okay, that's splitting hairs. Okay? That is splitting hairs in a big way. No, I'm talking about in the manner of just how the structure is at Warner Brothers, because we've seen it in full display with any DC EU film that's not named Wonder Woman and any DC film that wasn't Batman Begins or The Dark Knight. Let's be reasonable about that. Even though there's some of those that are probably underappreciated, like Superman Returns, but...
or The Dark Knight Rises.
Well, Dark Knight Rises it gets a lot of flack because of its ending, and I think
I hate that ending.
I think that I've really grown to dislike that over the years. But it's like, why on earth would you think that anyone with even a shred of artistic integrity would intentionally want someone to ruin their property? Like, that's a part that just, I cannot even wrap my brain around. It's like, okay, yeah, maybe George is a petty guy, maybe George is vindictive, I don't know.
Wouldn't you be?
But why would you sell it to Disney? Why would you sell it to Disney in that moment, after they purchased Pixar, after they purchased Marvel, and wound up turning that into a huge success. Let's be fair. Let's remember that the sale of Lucasfilm happened 5 months after the Avengers came out. So the whole thought that he was intentionally trying to wreck Star Wars by selling it to Disney just doesn't hold any water. You're basically trying to carry water with a bucket with a hole with the entire bottom removed. That's how ridiculous you sound. It feels like it's just, and I know that we've gotten way off topic here, but
we tend to do that.
But at the same time, this is one thing where there's just been so much to talk about that it's just everything, all the frustration I think from the last 20 years of being a Star Wars fan, it's bubbling up to the surface, and I think that this is absolutely just this whole thing. Like, I officially stopped giving a you-know-what about what George did to his property when the Blu-rays came out. And everyone made that big deal over the changes in Return of the Jedi. And when I initially saw them, I was just like, this is what we're complaining about? For heaven's sakes. Like, I got why people didn't like it, but I didn't mind it. And it's just, oh.
It was a dumb change, but it wasn't enough to cancel orders on.
I mean, and again, yeah, go through the history of our videos here on YouTube.
That was one,
that was our video. That was our very first video, was when we were talking about the Blu-rays over 5 years ago. 5 or 6 years ago at this point. Almost 7 at this point. God help us. Where's the time gone? But it's, I mean, the war has come, and I think that there's no two ways about it. And as much as, look, I really did enjoy The Last Jedi. I think that it's a really good second chapter, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what J.J. Abrams brings in Episode 9. Definitely a little disappointed that they didn't bring back Ryan Johnson when it looked like Colin Trevorrow was knocked off of Episode 9. But whatever works, man. I mean, I'm actually looking forward to seeing how this trilogy is going to turn out. So it's just like, can we?
I hope it goes out with a big finale, big climactic thing worthy of closing out 9 episodes.
I would hope so too, because I think from everything that, and yeah, Ryan Johnson is saying that he's doing. They've already announced that Ryan Johnson is going to be doing a new trilogy. But that also could mean that he could be doing something that's completely separate from this trilogy.
Oh, they said that it is. People are speculating that it might tie in with the kids at the end of this movie.
I mean, there's some people that have said that. I'm just saying that at this point, it's like, you know, nothing should be off the table in regards to Star Wars at this point. That's, I think, the big point that I think that everyone should make. Like, I don't want to turn Star Wars into Game of Thrones, but I also don't want Star Wars to continue jogging in place and being basically one way, the way that so many people have thought it is for over 40 years, because that's going to lead to the stagnation of this franchise more than anything else. Not directors like Ryan Johnson deciding, okay, let's have a movie where we're going to have some intrigue where you're not going to be able to tell. Let's see if maybe I can if I can turn a couple of concepts that we thought that we knew about the Force on their head. I mean, because what is a movie if not for having surprises? And I know that so many people want to talk about Marvel fatigue, but they still have fun bits in their movie that makes us forget that we're easily a decade in with this thing.
Mm-hmm.
So, I don't know. I want to enjoy this stuff, but I also hope that there's a more sane segment of fandom out there that just gets it through their head. Hey, let's enjoy this at some point. Let's stop nitpicking for everything and stop taking this stuff so personal. Is that really so much to ask?
Apparently.
Maybe there will be some that'll finally wake up the way that I did when I saw those Blu-ray changes. I can only hope.
I mean, one thing to consider with this movie, with how divisive it's been, Empire Strikes Back was a very divisive movie when it came out. Oh, it wasn't as upbeat and fun as the first one. But what do you mean Darth Vader is his father? Does that mean Obi-Wan lied to him? Obi-Wan wouldn't lie to Luke. And where's the ending? What about Han Solo?
I mean, yeah, I mean, the box office numbers for that were certainly less, and let's be fair, it's only been, say, ever since I think, the special editions came out that people started to look at that as sort of like the best movie of the original trilogy.
I would say mid-90s, honestly.
Okay.
Somewhere around the ballpark of Clerks.
Yeah, you could have several different conversations with that, let's be fair. But no, I mean, the controversy is nothing new for Star Wars movies, but man, it just gets irritating when it just feels like that there should be people that just know better, just act like a bunch of brats.
It's fanboy entitlement.
Thank you very much, Red Letter Media. No, I'm dead serious when I say that. Mike Stacklasa is the Gene Seed of modern internet fandom entitlement. Bar none, bottom line. End of story. And I will hear no words to the contrary of that.
So,
on that lovely note,
do we change topics, or?
Well, what else do you think that we could talk about?
A lot of the, more of the criticisms I've seen hurled on this.
Well, what's another one that you've heard?
Well, a lot of people have said that Luke's death was unsatisfactory. In fact, a lot of people are up in arms that Luke died at all.
I'm not at all surprised that was going to be a contentious one, because when I saw that in the theater, even I knew, just looking at that, it's just like, I mean, part of the reason that we didn't even do an instant reaction to this whole thing was because we knew that there was no way that we were going to be able to talk about this without getting into serious spoiler territory. Mm-hmm. And in a lot of ways, I'm glad that we did wait to talk about this. I don't think that Luke's death was unsatisfactory. In fact,
I thought that was a perfectly fitting death.
Absolutely. He died saving the Resistance. He died making sure that his sister and his student got free of the First Order.
He was able to school his student epically by not even having to be there. If that's not power in the Force, I don't know what is. I mean, people wanted him to go out in the blaze in a real lightsaber battle. That goes against everything that they love about Yoda in Empire Strikes Back. The same people that said that Yoda was ruined by having a lightsaber in the prequels.
Which he wasn't, but let's go ahead and get away from that, or else we're going to go on another hour-long tangent.
A Jedi uses the Force for knowledge and defense, never for attack.
And that's exactly how he used it. And it's just like, I mean, I think that Luke's death is perfectly fine. Now, here's another. Okay, what's another criticism that you had? Because I've got another topic we could talk about.
Not a criticism, but let's talk a little bit about a surprise cameo.
Yes, Gesundheit.
No, not Gesundheit. Yoda. That was an amazing surprise.
I don't think anyone, like a lot of people have been hearing rumblings that one of the three Force ghosts, Anakin, Obi-Wan, or Yoda, were going to make an appearance in this moment.
People were really speculating Hayden Christensen returning as Anakin, which would have been great. But I think of the three, the easiest to have done was definitely Yoda.
I agree with that, and probably, if we're being entirely honest, probably the right choice. Mm-hmm. I definitely think that was the right choice.
The Yoda puppet, when I first saw it, I wasn't too satisfied with the puppet. I felt it looked a little too clean, a little too maybe digitally enhanced, I don't know. But this time around, I found that it looked more like the original puppet than I had remembered. Well, the things that may have thrown me off a bit were the flesh tone was a different kind of green than I was used to. That may have had something to do with the lighting. I remember 20 years ago going to see the Magic of Myth Star Wars exhibit at the Air and Space Museum in DC, and I remember seeing the Yoda puppet there, the original Yoda puppet, and thinking, it doesn't look like the one from the movie, but I was assured that it was the original one. It probably looked different because Frank Oz's hand wasn't up its ass, and the lighting was very different.
Right, and I think that that's something that just a lot of people just forget when it comes to when we see a movie, just how much goes into it. Lighting and coloring really count for a lot.
But what do still stick out to me with this Yoda scene is the movements don't seem as genuine as an Empire or Return of the Jedi. I'm not putting any blame or anything on Frank Oz. I'm sure he was delighted to do the scene again, but it has been 30 years since he worked that puppet. Not 30
years.
No, Phantom Menace. He did the puppet in that before it was changed to the digital
Yoda that it was on the Blu-ray set. I'm glad that you remembered that.
Yeah,
but that's still like almost 20 years at this point.
Close to. And the other issue being his voice. He seemed like he was doing his more Grover-like silly Yoda when we were first introduced to him, and less the wise Yoda, because silly Yoda, silly Yoda talks like this he does, but where wise Yoda is more down.
Well, I think
serious.
I think that some of that just might be because it might be because in that moment he's basically trying to get it through to Luke, hey, you know what? It's time for you, it's time to stop, it's time to sort of get over yourself. Because I really like to think of that moment where he comes in as sort of him staging Luke's intervention, basically, in that moment, basically saying, it's time for you to get over yourself. You failed, but you have another chance right here. But don't forget that a failure can still be a teachable moment.
What I keep getting reminded of with the whole failure is the greatest teacher and kill the past kind of thing, I'm reminded of Rafiki. What does it matter? It's in the past.
That's a very good point. But yeah, it's just another really good scene right there. So, okay, before this, why don't we actually go on to one thing. Now, I'll do one bit of speculation for episode 9, and I think that you brought this up when you talked about this on Facebook. The thoughts about episode 9 is, what do you do with Leia? That's a big question, but I think that there was one.
It's a pretty obvious answer.
Well, it's an obvious answer, but how you handle it. But I think that the suggestion that I heard is probably one of the better ways that you could handle it. Go back to Civil War and see how they handled the death of Peggy Carter.
Yes.
Maybe something in that vein is how they should handle Leia in episode 9.
Absolutely.
And I think that if JJ doesn't see that, well, someone on the writing staff needs to smack him atop the head. Not to say that I don't have faith in J.J. Abrams. I think that he'll find a way to finish this off strong. Though I know that there are Lost fans out there that would probably like to say other things to the contrary, of course. But you know what? I never watched a single episode of Lost, so I can't say anything to that effect. But now we find ourselves in this in sort of a new situation, because now episode 8 is in the books. Solo is going to be coming out this May, and I think that didn't they say that they were doing episode 9 in May of 2019?
December of 2019.
December 2019.
So we have a longer wait.
Oh, okay, so it's the same weight.
Not between Solo.
Okay, no, I get what you're saying. You're right about that.
Having talked about Yoda's comeback, if there's one thing I would like to see in Episode 9, and I'm not going to hold this against anybody if this doesn't happen, this is just wishful thinking, I would like to see all the Force Ghosts, Luke included,
Yes.
come back in a moment of facing Kylo. Bring Hayden Christensen back as Anakin.
Bring Ewan McGregor back.
Bring Ewan McGregor back as Obi-Wan and digitally make him look like Alec Guinness.
Sort of like what they did with Tarkin and Leia in Rogue One.
Yes.
I honestly think that would be a great idea, and I agree with you. That's sort of a fanboy idea, but I think even there are some people who look at the prequel trilogy with maybe not so much of the disdain as they once did, but sort of just like, yeah, these weren't great movies, but were they really all as bad as we thought they were? Basically,
there are people trying to call this movie worse than the prequels. I mean, look at that user score. It is lower than Attack of the Clones.
I got nothing to say. I'm just... I don't know.
I'm like that guy in Dracula's Daughter, always bringing her down.
But no, I mean, I honestly think if nothing else, I would want Hayden Christensen to come back and just give it one more time. I
mean, with a better writer, he's sure to do something good.
I agree. I think if there's one guy that deserves to have something things reclamated for him, it's him, because I think he seems like a nice enough guy. Let's be fair. I think that he just, to be in that situation at his age, when he first took the role, it was
anybody would be overwhelmed.
Yeah. So I don't necessarily hold that against him, but no, I mean, hey, I just hope that things work out well.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think that's all that we're gonna talk about here, because we definitely talked about a lot. But hey,
yeah.
You know what? This is one where I think that it was necessary, and all the tangents that we usually go on. Well, let's face it. There's been so many things to talk about with this movie, even in the short 2 weeks since it's released. There's no two ways about it. There was just so much
and everybody has said so much already. What could we add?
What could we add? But at the same time, it's just like, hey, come on, Star Wars fans, let's try to be a little bit better going forward. I think that's the one thing that I'll say.
Be excellent to each other.
Amen to that. So with that, we're going to go on ahead, sign off here. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. We'll hopefully have some more stuff for you here in the coming months, especially in 2018.
Happy New Year.
And have yourselves a great day.
May the Force be with you all.